It's time for Michigan's newest sports talk show, Mitten Madness.
And here he goes. Defense win championship.
Michigan sports talk from here in Battle Creek. The latest stories, the biggest games, all across the Mitten State.
That's not something to play with.
Streaming live and on demand on the 95.3 WBCK app. Here are your hosts, Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes.
Hello there, good morning. It is Mitten Madness on 95.3 WBCK. Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes. Let's talk Michigan sports for the next hour. We've got a lot of fun stuff lined up, especially when it comes to Michigan and Michigan State basketball. They met last night. Fortunately, that puts us in a little bit of a predicament. Recording before that game takes place, pre-recorded show airing on a Saturday morning. We will discuss both teams as much as we can around the context of that huge matchup from Friday night. We've also got to get back into the swing of things with the Red Wings and the Pistons, who are coming off the All-Star breaks, and we've got more picks to make towards the end of the show. And that Michigan State game, it's still on the docket, might not matter all that much, but we've got a lot of fun stuff to get into. And before we do, DJ, how's it going, man?
I'm nervous, obviously, as we record this going into that game. But the weekend's going to be fun. There's tons of sports going on, and we're going to be at Why Not? And I've got a remote event going on Sunday. So I'm kind of just vibing in the good part of the year. So I can't complain as basketball season comes to an end. High school lacrosse starts in 2 weeks.
Oh, you're about to get real busy.
Yeah.
Well, best of luck to you as you get prepared for the lacrosse season. I don't know. Alabama basketball is in a slump. None of my sports are on. I don't know. I'm enjoying WrestleMania season in wrestling. I mean, that's the most sports-centric thing that is keeping my spirits high, outside of daily playing college football. College football 25. Still, obsessed. But let's get into it, man. Michigan State, let's start on that side of the rivalry. They are not the top team in the Big Ten. They're 12-3. I mean, they are if they beat Michigan last night, but again, we can't talk around that every single time we say a sentence. Nonetheless, Michigan State at the top of the conference with Michigan, and it's a tough stretch down the back half of the season, as we've discussed. Maryland is on deck. Wisconsin after that. Iowa will sneak up on you, especially late in the season, and then another meeting with Michigan to close things out. Both these teams, though, are going to be in the big dance. Both of these teams are going to be players in the Big Ten tournament as much as they want to be, which is such an interesting thing for me. But nonetheless, Michigan State, they've really got to build some momentum, though, coming off of a tough stretch. Yeah, they beat Purdue. That kind of helps with that momentum. But those three losses still really stand out to me, especially when they happened. So they need to string together wins. Regardless of what happened last night, they got to close out strong.
Coming off of what I believe to be a loss last night, because that's who I think, I'm a Michigan fan. Obviously, I'm not picking State to beat us. They're going into a tough game with Maryland, but Maryland is nowhere near, in my opinion, the talent that you see from Michigan, that you see from Wisconsin, that you see from Purdue, right? They're good, but they're not that good. So I think that's a win that they can kind of stuff in their back pocket. It's going to be a tough game because it is still a ranked opponent. It is still a Big Ten opponent, but it's not Michigan, Wisconsin. So they just have to worry about not getting caught up in that trap game of having two very tough opponents and then a opponent in between that's not as good as those two. But I don't think it's a concern where Michigan State should be too upset. They do have kind of a game to give over Wisconsin with you playing Wisconsin soon. And maybe Wisconsin loses to Oregon this weekend, or they drop their next game against Northwestern. Now, both of those are plausible. They could happen, but the chances are low. But you do kind of have that game to play with. And then you have Iowa before you play Michigan again. So like I said last week when we were picking the Michigan game, we were talking about this. They can afford to drop one or two of these and still be okay. And I do kind of expect that to happen. I think they only drop one. And if they drop 2, it'll be both to Michigan. I don't think Wisconsin or Maryland has enough to beat Michigan State. But, it comes down to them playing the games on the floor. The biggest thing is they're going to have to continue playing the kind of ball they're playing right now, which is just exciting. They're excited to play with each other, and they're playing Michigan State basketball, being tough, gritty on the defensive end, closing out possessions with defense, and then getting out and running. And then having 1 or 2 guys that can just make something happen when it seems like there's nothing there. So I'm just excited to see these 2 teams battle twice in the next couple of days, and then what happens in the meantime.
So something that is not happening for Michigan State is sinking 3-point attempts, actually. So as we're getting closer to March Madness, Jay Billis comes out with the 68 teams that you need to know something about in college basketball as we get closer and closer to the big dance. And Michigan State, DJ, I don't know if you're going to believe this, after 25 games, ranked 354th out of 356 Division I teams in 3-point accuracy. Now, of course, MSU is 20-5. They've found ways to circumvent that issue by getting to the free throw line. They're second in the Big Ten in getting to, or at least in converting their free throws. Is that an acceptable balance for a team that clearly has high aspirations? You don't lead the Big Ten for most of the season. You don't lead the Big Ten in the standings for most of the season without expectations that you can go really far in the big dance.
I don't think it's too much of a concern. They're going to have to hit some threes, but honestly, that would be more of a concern if Michigan was shooting that way. Michigan shoots far more threes than they do. Alabama shoots tons of threes. You're looking more at a 3-and-D type of team, a live by the 3, die by the 3 type of team. Michigan State's not that. They have plenty of guys who drive straight to the hole. They have paint presence where guys are all about getting the offensive rebound, going back up. They're all about getting out in transition and getting easy layups and dunks. So they do a great job of monitoring, their shot selection. But I think the bigger thing is they're going to have to work on that shooting in the settled set. When you get into the big dance, there's going to be times where you're going to have to play in a half-court offense and you're going to have to hit an open 3. Can you do it is the question mark.
Yeah, if you're going to be playing underneath, you're going to need some size, and that is at least one thing that the Spartans are not lacking. It's not a small basketball team. There are a couple of guards that are sub 6'3", but the big guys are big, so they can contend with the big guys of the Michigans of the world, the Houstons of the world. So it is something that you can get around. If it's not your strength, lean into your strengths and abandon your weaknesses. Don't focus on the things that you don't do well. Focus on the things that you do right. And at the end of the day, in a lot of ways, basketball is a lot more physical game than a lot of people give it credit for. So when you can be dominant in the paint, when you can be dominant on rebounds and defense and those types of things, sometimes you don't need the analytical boost that comes from hitting threes as opposed to jump shots. Nonetheless, we'll continue to see how Michigan State performs throughout the season. Let's get to your Wolverines, DJ. Again, Michigan State being what it is, win or not, a little bit easier of a close to the season for the Wolverines. Nebraska is up next, Rutgers, Illinois, Maryland, and then that second date with Michigan State to close things out. Certainly on the other side of the coin, Michigan has a lot more momentum in their favor, depending, of course, how Friday night went. But, I mean, even if we're sitting here and Michigan State did win that game last night, I feel more confident in Michigan's aspirations because they also have the size, they also have the grit, they also have the defense. They're a solid shooting team. And again, they have led with more momentum this conference. It seems to me like they have better prospects heading into the postseason than their counterparts in Green do.
It's tough. I think there's some players that are far and above. When you're looking, Trey Donaldson, Danny Wolf, Vlad Golden, they're 3 of the best prospects in the country at the moment, just based off of how they are playing. But when you look at mentality, when you look at team, when you look at coaching, you can never count Michigan State out, especially when they're playing Michigan. It's a huge, hurdle for Michigan because Michigan State is so good. And Michigan State feeds off that energy if we want to be honest here, their basketball team is it on campus. Like, that's what people go there for. The hockey team has been pretty good this year, so people have started to turn out for them. But this is what people are drawn to Michigan State for, is basketball, specifically men's basketball. So they take pride in that honor and doing well for the university. So I don't think there's really a difference in, like, I don't think the talent difference makes too much of a difference for Michigan versus Michigan State. I think it comes down to a lot of different factors that are played into it. And Michigan, in my opinion, is catching up to Michigan State, and one of the most important, and that's coaching. I think the way Dusty May coaches, how he motivates, and the way he goes about the game, very similar yet still different from Tom Izzo, which is why you're seeing the spark, the spark that we've seen from Michigan in the last few weeks. It's really ignited them to be one of the best teams in the country. And looking at their schedule, you have 3 road games and a ranked game. And really the only games I'm concerned, Michigan State twice, Illinois. I think Maryland, Rutgers, Nebraska are easy wins for Michigan.
No doubt, and that's only going to help with the seeding and all of that. But to your point about the coaching, not only is Danny Wolf and Golden put into positions to succeed, but how about Namari Burnett, another transfer that comes in, and a guy who's known for his defense, but there's a reason he had a stint in Alabama. It's because he could hit those threes and play defense, hitting 53 pointers, 43% shooting from behind the arc. That's going to lend to some success as well and give Michigan that boost that they need on the perimeter when they're already strong underneath and on the inside. But we'll take a break, and when we come back, it's time to dive into the Pistons as well as the Red Wings as they return from the All-Star break. It's Mitten Madness on 95.3 WBCK. All right, we're back here on Mitten Madness 95.3 WBCK. Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes about ready to talk some Detroit Pistons and their return from the All-Star break. First, do want to give a shout out to Third Coast Move Managers here in Kalamazoo, and they are helping me with my small move. They can help you with yours as well. They specialize in small services, seniors as well, real estate marketing preparation, relocation services, and more. Not for big house-to-house moves, but apartment-to-apartment, helping seniors get to assisted living situations, and all those different types of things. They can be a big, big help for you and your family. Give them a call, 269-271-3650, or check them out online, thirdcoastmove.com. You can also find them on Facebook for more information. All right, let's get to the Detroit Pistons, who are coming off a 4-game winning streak pre-All-Star break, and now they are looking to get back on track. They will start off with the Spurs, and not to pour salt in a wound, but the Spurs are going to be much weaker than anticipated, with Victor Wembanyama likely to miss the entire season due to a blood clot in his shoulder. So no matter what, Victor was never going to play in this game, even if Detroit had got the first overall pick last year. Nonetheless, fun start to the second half of the season, half relative. San Antonio and Atlanta on the road, back home for the Clippers, Boston, Denver, and Brooklyn. It's an interesting stretch there. As we get into March, DJ, the Pistons didn't make a lot of groundbreaking moves prior to the trade deadline and the All-Star break, but maybe that consistency is what's going to help them come out of the other side of this break with that same momentum that they carried into it, where they were winners of 4 straight and 6 of their last 8. They've been playing really strong basketball.
Yeah, I mean, they have. And the bigger part is that they understand that they kind of just have to remain where they are in order to be successful. They're in the playoffs right now. They're not in the play-in. They're in the playoffs right now, which I think is huge. And when you look at what they have coming up in the rest of the year, more than half of them are on the outside looking in terms of playoffs. Some of these teams are in the play-in. Some of these teams aren't even in the play-in, which means at the moment, the Pistons are better than a majority of their remaining schedule.
Yeah.
That's good. Now you're looking to compete against the Bostons, the Denvers, the Clevelands, the Oklahoma Cities, New York, Milwaukee. You're just looking to keep those games close. Maybe you steal a couple of them here and there, but you're looking to get better in those games so that when it's time to play a playoff series, you're ready for that kind of competition and you can be competitive in those games. You're not getting blown out and swept in 4 games sent home. But also in that same standpoint, you got to go out and win the games you're supposed to win. A Wemby-less San Antonio, that should be a win.
Yeah.
The struggling Atlanta Hawks, that should be a win. Brooklyn has been struggling this year. Go get a win. The Clippers haven't been great, but they're not terrible. That's a nice win for you. Portland has been bad. Washington back-to-back at home Tuesday and then Thursday in March. Those should both be wins. They have been bad this year. So those kind of games are the ones they have to get a grasp on. But I think most importantly is that they got to come out finding that groove that they had before the All-Star break.
Yeah, when you look at the entire remaining schedule, a lot of the toughest games are in the West. So those are games that you can afford to simply measure yourself. It's not that big of a deal if you lose a game in an interconference matchup. And some of the tougher games in the Eastern side of things are spread out enough for you to be able to also compare yourself with the competition that you are going to be facing in late April, with the likes of Boston, with the likes of New York late, Milwaukee late. There's opportunities, I think, throughout this schedule to really get a grasp of just how good the Pistons are down the stretch. Comparatively speaking, if this entire schedule were completely different and all it was just Eastern Conference games and it was a varying degree of difficulty and varying degrees of home and aways and all those different types of things. If it was completely different than what it is, I feel like it might be a little bit more difficult to get that grasp, and you might go into the playoffs with a little bit less confidence. But, you play a Clippers team that's in the same exact boat as you are as the 6th seed in the West. That gives you a strong opportunity. You play Minnesota and Dallas and Golden State, who are the teams looking to get into the play-in situation and try to earn their way into the postseason late. You can prove that you're head and shoulders above them. Same with playing the Hawks and the Magic and Brooklyn, who are kind of in that same boat in the East. It's kind of a golden opportunity here for Detroit to really capitalize on their positioning with the way that the season is unfolding. But I think too, to your point, you have to win those games that are givens on your schedule, and none more so than obviously San Antonio was last night. We don't know the outcome of that game. We assume Detroit would pull that game off without Victor Wembanyama. But then again, tomorrow, taking on Atlanta on the road, you still got to win that game so that you can come home strong on a 4-game stretch with some pretty serious competition with LA, Boston, and Denver. So I think all things considered, I don't think there's any reason that Pistons fans shouldn't be elated about the way that this season is about to get back on track for them. You got to check out Cade Cunningham in the All-Star game, and now you come back looking to keep that momentum going, and it looks like they have zero excuses not to do that. So, it almost begs the question of what if they don't meet those expectations? But I feel like maybe just riding it and seeing how things go might be the safer bet for Pistons fans.
Yeah, and I think the thing they want to go for here is to continue being good. I think you just want to stay out of the play-in. If you can get that 5-6 seed, cool. Right now, the projection is 6 seed against the 3-seeded Pacers, or like 4-seeded Pacers, 5-seeded Pistons. Either one of those kind of cool. I'm good with that. You're not traveling far for this first series. You're playing a team that is built very similarly to you. So there's a chance for you to come out with a playoff series win for the first time since, I believe, 2005, which would be huge.
Yeah. Is there any team in the East? It feels like that top 6 is almost locked in, and that feels like an ignorant thing to believe just getting the second half of the season kicked off. But is Orlando, Miami, Atlanta, Chicago, like those are the teams behind Detroit looking for that play-in spot? Are any of those teams really in a position? Maybe Philadelphia, if they're healthy down the stretch, that can, okay, you're shaking your head immediately.
Philly, no. Philly's not happening.
But are any of those teams a threat to that 6th seed position for Detroit, or is it Detroit's to lose?
Magic. I think the Magic are. The Magic have beat them a couple times. There's still another game left with the Magic in the season series this year, and they're the closest. Like, they're only a couple games behind the Pistons. I think the Heat could, but after their trade with giving Jimmy Butler away, I don't know if they have enough to win the games they need to win in order to jump not only the Pistons, they have to jump the Magic as well. So it all just kind of comes down to who these teams get help from in terms of teams losing other games to give them a boost when they win a game. But realistically, only Orlando and Miami have a shot, in my opinion. I think that 3.5 game lead, and then even when you look down at the Bulls, it's a almost 8 game lead for the Pistons. So you're looking at a sizable lead for, two of those teams, and the other ones are 2 and 3 games behind the Pistons. So they have a few games to give before things get sticky for them.
Yeah, I think the Pistons went ahead and knocked the Bulls out before the All-Star break with those 2 big wins. Dominant wins, by the way, to close that out. But yeah, I can see where you're coming from, and it definitely seems like a situation where if you're a Pistons fan, you kind of have to be looking at things like, all right, we're in the playoffs, and it's going to be very hard to not be in the playoffs, barring catastrophe. So in the meantime, just build momentum and prove that you belong there and prove that you're going to win games. And like you said, win a playoff series for the first time in 2 decades. The city would love it, man. I mean, every sport in the city has been fantastic in recent years, and it's just been a waiting game to see when the Pistons were going to catch up, and I think they've caught up a little bit faster than expected. The Eastern Conference layout does assist in a way, clearly, with the situation being, as we just discussed, with the playoff seeding. But nonetheless, it's impressive to be where they're at already. We've talked about the team a lot. One guy in particular was able to celebrate at the All-Star games, and that's Cade Cunningham, first guy to be in the All-Star break for Detroit in a long, long time. Break down his performance in the way that he shined on a national stage.
There wasn't too much really in the game. He got out there, scored a couple.
Yeah.
It was
just what it is.
Yeah, the game is what it is, but I think the bigger thing is Pistons fans being able to know, the Pistons organization being able to know that they put someone back, on that level. You had a Sir Thompson there in the Rising Stars Challenge with his twin brother. That's something also to look forward to. But the big thing is those Pistons fans that love Cade Cunningham, you got some gear that's going to be coming out soon. His new logo dropped, which he premiered with a new Nike Tech fit. It had his double C's on it in a new fashion. And I think that's kind of the biggest news for Cade, is that he's continuing to make money outside of the game. He's being recognized for being a star, which is huge to not only getting other players to come in and play with him, but to keep that level high and keep eyes on your team.
Yeah, solid marketing around an NBA player. I don't think people understand how necessary that is. It is vital. Think about a lot of guys who have been stars in the past and you just don't hear about them a lot anymore. It's difficult if you do not have a supporting cast of people who know how to basically operate your player status as a business and make that player money and then make the team better as a result, because recruitment matters. If you've heard about Aiden Hutchinson recruiting Myles Garrett to the Lions, it's only because Aiden Hutchinson is such a widely respected player for his on-the-field stuff as well as off-the-field stuff. And he's done that early in his career. Cade Cunningham doing basically the same thing in the NBA. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll do the same thing for the Detroit Red Wings. They're coming off of the All-Star break as well, and they will get started later today against the Minnesota Wild. We'll break that game down and the upcoming schedule and more with the Red Wings next on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK.
Detroit sports fans, Wolverines and Spartans alike, this is your sports show, Mitten Madness, with Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes on 95.3 WBCK.
All right, we're back here on Mitten Madness, 95.3 WBCK. Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes. We got to touch on the Detroit Red Wings, much in the same way that we did the Pistons, because they are also coming off of their All-Star break, and they start with a tough game in the Western Conference, though they will be at home hosting the Minnesota Wild later today on ESPN Plus and ABC at noon 30 against the Minnesota Wild. It'll be an interesting return there. Not an easy game, not an excruciatingly difficult game, but a interesting test nonetheless against one of the top 3 seeds in the Central Western Conference division. The Red Wings don't have quite as much momentum. They did lose their last game prior to the All-Star break to the Tampa Bay Lightning, which did do a little bit of damage. But nonetheless, Red Wings are very much in a similar boat to the Pistons as far as playoff seeding goes, because they currently have that second seed in the playoffs. The wild card, I should say, they're almost basically tied there with Ottawa, with Columbus and Boston trailing closest behind, both back a point each from Detroit. I mean, DJ,
I actually put the Red Wings conversation a little bit closer to what we're seeing with the Bulls and like the 76ers and that small group down there. Not necessarily like skill-wise, but just the tightness of it. Ottawa holds the top spot in the wild card in the East. They're 1 point above the Red Wings, who are in second for that second wild card spot. But they're 1 point above both the Blue Jackets and the Bruins, who are only 2 points above the Rangers, who are only 1 point above the Islanders. You have like 6-7 teams that are fighting for these 2 spots.
Yeah, it's tight.
It's tight. Whereas there's a little more space in that 6 to 10 range to play with in the NBA. Here, you have no margin of error because the teams behind you are gunning, because they can all taste it. That's going down to, I mean, you could probably even bunch in the Canadians, the Flyers, and the Penguins in that too, who have 55 points in comparison to the Red Wings 61. They're 6 points behind you. All of those teams under you feel like they have a shot at the wild card spot. So you have to play like there's 6 teams behind you wanting your spot, because that's exactly what it is. And then you still have to be playing like you're trying to get above Ottawa at the least so that you can be successful and get into the playoffs. So they're in a very tight window where they have so much less margin of error than what the Pistons have. You ask me, the Pistons have 2, 3, 4 games to play with, because even if they lose 4 games in the next, couple of weeks, they're only like 7th or 8th, which means they're still in the play-in.
Yeah.
And they're on the right side of the play-in where they get a couple games to figure it out. Especially if you're 7, you get 2 games. Because if you lose that first one, you still have to play whoever was in the 9-10 game for a chance at the 8 seed. That's far better situation what the Red Wings are in. But I think the difference is that the Red Wings are coming into a situation where we're playing their very best hockey right before the break. The season started slower for them than it started for the Pistons. So are they able to maintain the momentum that was so hot for them at the moment? The Pistons have kind of gone through an up and down situation where they have momentum for a little bit, then they lose it, then they get it back, and they lose it. The Red Wings didn't have it, and then they got it.
Yeah.
So can you hold on to it is the question.
They are, since Christmas, 15-5-1, which is remarkably impressive. Of course, losing that last one to Tampa Bay does hurt. And similar, if we're continuing the comparisons to the Pistons, the Pistons have a pretty favorable second half schedule, especially when it comes to the East. There's a lot of discrepancy. There's not a lot of teams that are like right there in their ballpark. And as you mentioned, the NHL, a little bit tighter in that region. The Eastern teams that the Red Wings are going to have to take on, none of them are easy. You've got Columbus back-to-back to close out February and kick off March. Carolina, trip to Washington, trip to Ottawa. Buffalo is the only easy one I have seen so far on this entire schedule. Carolina again, Washington, Ottawa, Boston, Carolina, Florida, Montreal, Florida, Tampa Bay, New Jersey, Toronto, all of those teams. Toronto is one of those that's going to stick out as well. Because that's an opportunity where if you are playing well, once you get to that Toronto game, that could be a massive game that could put you into the top 3 seeds in the Atlantic Division rather than in the wild card. But you have to take care of a lot of business before you get to that final game of the regular season. And especially considering all of those Eastern Conference games are difficult and not all of the Western Conference games are easy as well. So it's not going to be an easy task for the Red Wings to keep serve. That said, it's not like those big winning streaks were exclusively against bad teams. Sure, there were plenty of bad teams. Chicago was mixed in there. In some of these winning streaks to close out the first half of the season. But it certainly will not be an easy stretch down the second half of the season. Maybe in saying that Detroit, the Pistons and the Red Wings are in similar boats is purely off of playoff positioning. But I think you're right. The Red Wings have a much taller task to preserve their spot, much less improve their spot heading into the postseason.
Yeah, I just think that they have to go out. Like, the tough thing about hockey is it's a game where you have to go out and give your all every single night that you're out there. And sometimes the puck just doesn't bounce your way. I think that's been the situation for the Red Wings. They've had great goaltending for most of the season. They just haven't gotten the pucks to bounce their way enough the other way to get enough goals to offset. I mean, yeah, you can ask your goalie to go out and make 60 saves in a game, but he's going to let up a goal or two here and there, which means you got to go out and score 2, 3, 4 goals in that same game. And the Wings haven't always done that this year. So you're going to need goal scoring. I think that's the biggest thing here is I think the defense has been good. I think that the goaltending has been great, but can you score enough goals to compete with the Florida Panthers, the Maple Leafs, the Lightning? Even the Capitals have been scoring phenomenal this year. They're plus 56 on the year. The Blue Devils plus 33. The Wings aren't doing terrible because they're minus 11. You would like to see that be positive, but when you look, there aren't too many teams. There's no one below them that has a positive rating. None of them are really that much better than them when it comes to scoring goals, but they're so much better than a lot of these teams at goaltending. So if you can keep your goaltending at a high and then start to catch up offensively, the Wings could make a run over the next month and a half that would be something that nobody really saw coming in the NHL and puts them right in spot to not only have a wild card spot, but maybe even push for one of those Atlantic spots in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, keep it simple. Just score more points than the other team. That said, to put everything in perspective about how difficult the Red Wings' path to the postseason is, they are actually a minus 280 to miss the playoffs. And that's because their remaining schedule is among the top 5 for most difficult in the NHL based on schedule metrics. Not only is that a lot to overcome, considering that they had a coaching change, and a lot of that is what boosted their momentum, and to preserve that momentum through an all-star break is not the easiest thing in the world. Other teams that are in very similar boats to them, particularly Ottawa, who is the other team in the wild card, and Montreal, who is, right behind them. Montreal did not close the first half of the season off well, 2-7-1 in their last 10. But both of those teams have among the easiest schedules remaining in the NHL. And, that could help Ottawa solidify themselves above Detroit and make it difficult for Detroit to stave off a team like Montreal. And lest we forget, Columbus and Boston have been here and done that before too. They could very easily surge down the stretch and find themselves back in the postseason in lieu of the Detroit Red Wings. So I know Red Wings fans don't want to see a repeat of last year's collapse. I know it is slightly different based off of the way the season started, but it will not be an easy road for the Red Wings to preserve a playoff spot by any stretch of the imagination. All right, we'll take a break, and when we come back, it is time for us to make our picks this week. We'll do that next here on Mitten Madness, 95.3
95.3 WBCK.
All right, we're back here on Mitten Madness 95.3 WBCK. Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes. It's time for us to make our picks. DJ, how are the standings looking after 1 week?
After 1 week, we're still waiting on that Michigan State game from yesterday, which obviously you guys know we will not have a comment on that until next week. But I went 3-2 in the 5 games that we had. You went 2-3. It was your Crimson Tide that really cost you.
Not surprising. Alabama has not been rolling here lately. That is to put it mildly. Let's get started in the Big 12 because I know you're going to bring us back to Alabama here very, very soon. The Houston Cougars are set to play host to the Iowa State Cyclones later today, 2 p.m. Houston is a big, big favorite, 80% chance to win. Nonetheless, Iowa State, 11-4 in conference. They are no scrubs. Can they be the ones to finally topple these Big 12 Cougars?
I would love to say that they will be, but I don't think so. I think that this game is going to be fun. I think it's going to be exciting. I think that this is two of the better teams in the Big 12. But what worries me is Iowa State lost to Kansas, and Kansas has not played good basketball this year at all. But they're very similar on paper. At the end of the day, it comes down to defense, and when you're only giving up almost 58 points against 57.6 points per game, you're going to win a lot of games. That's Houston, and I'm going to rock with Houston still.
Yeah, Iowa State is close to matching Houston on the boards, which is very impressive, and they play solid defense themselves. That said, Houston plays even better defense, and I think that's the difference. It's what makes Houston so incredible, why they're so good this season. I am going to stick with Houston, as I often do.
That is going to take us over to the SEC, and we are going to talk about that Alabama Crimson Tide basketball team.
Damn it.
Mark Sears has been Mark Sears the last few games because that's what he does. He goes out and he plays. I mean, he's averaging 18.5 on the year. He's got 5 assists to pair with that. They're welcoming in the Kentucky Wildcats to Coleman Coliseum, 6 p.m. on Saturday night. 70.4% chance for the Tide. Can the number 4 Crimson Tide bounce back from 2 losses in a row to Auburn and Mizzou to take down the Wildcats? Or will the Wildcats kind of make up for some of the struggles they've had this season?
Look, Alabama can't lose 3 games in a row. They just can't. Like, I feel like we get into this situation a lot where we're picking on a team that's been bad for 2 games and we say the words, they cannot lose 3 games in a row. Alabama cannot. They will get this right. Back at home after a tough road loss, which may have been circumstantial based on the loss to Auburn at home as well. They got to get their mojo back. This is a great opportunity to do so. They can beat Kentucky. They've done it before. They'll do it again. Give me the Tide.
Yeah, I think the big thing here is Alabama scores the ball at an unreal clip. Averaging 90 points per game is crazy. That's actually insane. Both of these teams do a great job of cleaning up on the boards, 44 and 39 respectively for Alabama and Kentucky. So it's just going to come down to which team makes a stop and which one doesn't. And I think the home crowd is going to help Alabama a ton in this game. Give me the Tide to win at home in Coleman Coliseum.
All right, let's go back to the Big 12 and let's talk about the Houston Cougars again. These are the top 25 matchups over the next week. We didn't make the rules. Houston is set to be on the road in just a few days on Monday night. Tuesday night? Monday night, the 24th, 9 p.m. They will be in Lubbock, Texas to take on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, who are number 9 in the country. They are top 4, slotted just behind Iowa State in the Big 12. That said, they have lost in recent weeks to TCU and Arizona, whereas Houston could be riding an even longer win streak if they pull off the win over Iowa State. That said, DJ, who you got? The Texas Tech Red Raiders at home or the Houston Cougars on the road?
Even though this game is at home and it's a late night game for Texas Tech, which the Red Raider fans are going to be up for, I don't know if I can trust them. And that comes back to the fact that really Texas Tech is relying largely on JT Toppin, the younger brother of Obi Toppin. He's 17 points a game, 9.2 rebounds, but that's kind of all that they're leaning on. And really it goes back to that defense of Houston, who's holding opponents to just 57.6 points per game. Texas Tech used to scoring 81, but I don't know if they're going to get that high in a game against Houston.
Well, they scored 82 the last time they played. Texas Tech did beat Houston, and I think we picked this game on the 1st of February. They won by 1 point in overtime. That said, really hard to beat a team twice in the same season, and ignore the fact that I picked Alabama earlier. I'm sticking with Houston once again. Not wise to bet against them. I'm going to take the Cougs over the Raiders.
That's going to send us right back to Coleman Coliseum. It is another top 25 matchup. The only reason this game is going to be on the board. Well, also, Mississippi State has played great basketball this year. The Bulldogs are going to head into Coleman Coliseum for a 9 p.m. tip on Tuesday night as they take on the Crimson Tide. I mean, will the Bulldogs continue to roll in the SEC and, make a fight for not only conference tournament seeding, but NCAA tournament seeding? Or will the Crimson Tide come out on top of another game and look to improve on their record while also showing that their last 2 games were kind of more of a fluke than anything else?
Listen, if Alabama loses to Kentucky, they can't lose 4 games in a row. They just can't.
I mean, they can.
In all seriousness, Mississippi State really does need this game. So I think Mississippi State is going to make a game of it. Even if Alabama does beat Kentucky and I get my way there, Alabama has not been playing well. I know you said Marcus Sears has been doing his thing. He really hasn't. These 2 games where the Tide have lost, he's been a big part of that. It's a team issue. It's not just him. But, I mean, until everybody is firing on all cylinders, once again, Alabama's going to continue to struggle. So I'm not, even with a win over Kentucky, I still think they struggle against Mississippi State. I think it's close. Alabama still wins.
It's tough for me to pick a team to win twice in a week. And you're asking me to pick a team to win twice in a week.
They can't lose 4 games.
You're asking me to pick 2 teams to win twice in a week after I just picked a team to win twice in a week last week.
To be fair, we are both doing it.
And I do want to be fair. Somehow, it is both of our teams. So I think there's some bias falling behind those lines. But in this game, I think it's really going to come back to home court advantage. The way Alabama plays at home versus how they play on the road, very different, which is going to be troublesome for Alabama at some point. You got some road games coming up. You have neutral site games. Those are big deals. You got to be able to come out on top. But I think the big thing is one of the toughest games Auburn has gotten all year was from Alabama. That's huge. Auburn's the number 1 team in the country, and they don't look like they're slowing down anytime soon. So for Alabama to have given them the game they gave them, it gives me a lot of confidence in saying that they can come out on top in 2 games in a row against lesser competition. I'm going to take Bama to win this one as well.
Staying in the SEC, but ignoring the Tide for once, the Tennessee Volunteers will be in College Station to take on the Texas A&M Aggies. Number 6 versus number 7 later today at noon on ESPN. This is a very even matchup. Both teams have dropped a game recently that they know they probably shouldn't. With Texas A&M losing 70-54 to Mississippi State, Tennessee losing 2 outings ago to Kentucky 75-64. Though they did get a win back against Vanderbilt in between. DJ, who do you got between the Volunteers and the Aggies?
I think I'm going to make a really rash decision here. I'm going to go with the Texas A&M Aggies. I think that they are not going to wear those god-awful, hideous jerseys they dropped not too long ago.
That's everything in their closet.
No. Did you see their
the cult does not have a good fashion sense.
They did this really light gray that has just like the number right here, like no Texas A&M logo anywhere. Like it travesty.
Sounds about right.
The worst basketball uniform I've ever seen in my life. I'm going to find it so you can see exactly how bad it is. I don't think they wear those. I think the energy inside gives them a boost, but really it's their defense. I think that looking at some of the similar opponents and how they've held those similar opponents to less scoring than what Tennessee was able to. I think Tennessee provides more opportunities on the offensive end than Texas A&M does. I'm going to roll with Texas A&M.
I disagree. I'm going to go with Tennessee. I think I think they've been more impressive. I mean, they put up 85 on Mizzou to Texas A&M 67. I know that, 2 different types of games. It is what it is. But I think Tennessee, stronger team. They've had better outings. And they're better than their record indicates too, I think. So I'm going to go with the Volunteers.
That gets us to our last pick of the week. We are headed back into the Octagon. It is going to be another UFC fight night going down at Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle, Washington. It's going to be Henry Cejudo, 16-4, standing 5'4", 135 pounds, age of 38 with a 64-inch reach, fighting orthodox, going against Song Yadong, coming in 21-8-1, standing at 5'8", 136 pounds, just 27 years old with a 67-inch reach, and also fights in a orthodox fashion. Yadong is a negative 260 favorite in comparison to the 210 underdog for Cejudo. Does Cejudo maintain his winning ways as he does come into this game holding a belt? This will not be a championship fight. Or will Yadong come in, take the champ down, and maybe argue to have a championship fight coming up soon?
I think Yadong is going to get that one, man. Non-title fight, some of the pressure gets taken off, and some of the opportunity shines a little bit brighter without the same type of pressure. I think Song Yadong is going to pick this one up, and I do think it goes the distance. I'm going to follow the betting guide on this one. Take the favorite, take the odds that it goes the distance. Song Yadong wins.
I'm going to go with Song Yadong as well, and I just think it goes back to his reach advantage. This is going to be a heavy boxing fight. They're going to box for quite a while before it heads to the ground, and he has the advantage up top. So I think that will eventually lead to him gathering some extra points as long as he doesn't find himself being dominated on the ground. So that means we're split by one game again. We're both going to take Houston and Bama to double up on the week and come out with 2 wins. We're both going to take Song Yadong over Henry Cejudo. And I'm taking Texas A&M. You're taking Tennessee. You know what time it is. Get us into the weekend.
Let's get out of here. That's going to do it for Mitten Madness this week. We will see you guys again next week at 10 a.m. for another round of the show. For Da'Jzon Hughes, I'm Jacob Harrison. We'll see you guys next time. Take it easy.
Join Jacob Harrison and Da'Jzon Hughes every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. for Mitten Madness on 95.3 WBCK. Miss the show or want to run it back? Stream Mitten Madness on demand on the WBCK app. Sponsored by AirwayCashforJunkCars.com.